The runway lights blurred past at 200 feet per second. 8 turbofans screamed in unison. The B-52H Stratofortress, 60 tons of steel, fuel, and ordnance, clawed its way into the black sky, its wings bowing under the weight of what it carried. Inside the bomb bay, row after row of 2,000-pound Mark 84 general-purpose bombs sat silent in the dark, each one nearly 13 feet long. Each one meant for a target deep inside Iran. Nobody on that aircraft spoke for a long time. The order had come from the top. 20,000 troops brought to combat readiness. Across the country, military units began assembling their personnel. Transport trucks pulled up to barracks and staging areas. Soldiers loaded their rucksacks, packed with changes of clothing, hygiene kits, first aid supplies, rations, and personal essentials, onto the trucks and climbed aboard. They had been told they were heading to the Middle East for an undetermined period of time. That was all they were told. Anand's soldier had stuffed a photograph between his rations and his first aid kit. His wife, his daughter 8 months old, who had already taken her first steps without him there to see them. He zipped his rucksack shut, hoisted it onto his back, and climbed onto the truck without looking back at the barracks. Around him, the truck, filled with men carrying the same quiet weight, the weight of not knowing how long, not knowing what was waiting, not knowing when they would be back. The truck pulled out of the staging area and the base disappeared behind the tree line. At the same time, airborne units were going through their own process. The paratroopers had already rigged their main parachutes on their backs and their reserves on their chests. They carried their weapons in soft rifle cases, in their hands, slung over their shoulders alongside their combat packs. Heavy with gear, they moved with the practiced calm of people who had learned not to waste energy on fear. They formed 2 columns and marched toward the C-17 Globemaster III, waiting on the taxiway with its ramp down and its engines already running. They filed in without ceremony. The ramp closed. The aircraft lifted off. Back on the airfield, the B-52 crew worked through their pre-flight checks with the focused quiet of surgeons. The pilots tested their oxygen masks, verified the regulators, and adjusted the fit. The flight to target would exceed 12 hours at high altitude, and the oxygen system had to function perfectly for every minute of it. The crew packed their personal bags, water, snacks, maps, checklists, spare gloves, everything needed for a flight that would last most of a day. When the call came that the aircraft was ready, they walked out and loaded their gear aboard. Flight publications, mission planning materials, survival kits, everything stowed. The pilots climbed to the upper deck and settled into their ejection seats. Outside, ground crews had been loading the bombs with mechanical precision. Forklifts and bomb loaders brought the Mark 84s to the aircraft, one at a time. Each weapon was hoisted into the internal rotary launcher inside the bomb bay, or mounted on the external wing pylons. The ground crew guided each one into position, locked the mounting hooks, connected the arming wires, and secured everything in place. One by one, again and again, until the aircraft was carrying its full load below. The pilots in the lower compartment, the electronic warfare officer, and the navigator took their stations. Radar navigation systems, electronic countermeasures, weapon systems, everything on, everything ready. The engines started, all 8 turbofans winding up one after another, until the whole aircraft vibrated with contained power. The B-52 taxied to the runway, lined up and rolled. It used nearly the full length of the runway before it lifted. Then it climbed slowly, heavily, into the dark. On an aircraft carrier at sea, Marines prepared for their own departure. Their helicopter, a Sikorsky Chi-53E Super Stallion, was already parked on the flight deck with its rotors folded. The Marines grabbed their gear, climbed the ladderways to the flight deck, and walked to the aircraft. As they approached, the rotors unfolded, and the engines started. They boarded through the aft ramp, took their seats, and the Chi-53 lifted off the deck and headed inland toward the forward camp being established near the Iranian border. At Allied airfields across the region, -60 Black Hawks were already moving in constant rotation. They flew in pairs and groups, surging back and forth between staging bases and forward positions. Land drop troops, lift off, return, repeat. The rhythm of it was relentless, short flights, and constant. The soldiers moved from staging bases to their assigned units closer to the border, one helicopter load at a time. When the C-17 carrying the paratroopers reached the drop zone, the signal came through to the troop compartment. The jump masters gave the commands. The paratroopers stood, hooked up, checked their static lines, and went out of the aircraft one by one. Parachutes cracked open in a long trail behind the plane. Below, the ground was dark and vast. The silence after the roar of the aircraft was sudden and total. Within minutes, the entire stick was on the ground, gathering their chutes and moving to the rally point. The C-17, its paratroopers delivered, continued to an Allied airfield, landed, and taxied to the cargo ramp area. The rear ramp lowered, and the vehicles belonging to the unit, its support element, were driven off into the dust. All units converged on their designated positions. The paratroopers who jumped linked up with the vehicles and supplies that had arrived by air. The Marines flown in by CH-53 reached their assigned sector. The soldiers transported by Black Hawk were at their posts. Heavy equipment and vehicles were arriving on follow-on flights. Everyone began the process of establishing their positions, digging in, setting up communications, distributing ammunition, building the camp that would serve as their base of operations. The armor and heavy vehicles were already en route and would arrive shortly. The soldier with the photograph hit hard desert ground when he jumped down from his transport truck. He looked around at the flat horizon, at the dust rising in the distance from incoming vehicles, at the controlled chaos of an army assembling itself out of nothing. He thought about his daughter for one moment. Then he shouldered his rucksack and went to work. The force was fully assembled, fully equipped, ready for combat operations. Somewhere above them, unseen at 40,000 feet, the B-52 was already over Iranian airspace. Its bomb bay doors had not yet opened, but they would. A voice crackled sharp over a radio nearby. Urgent, no room for questions. Someone grabbed the soldier by the arm and pulled him down into the dirt just as the sky split open with sound. The gun run had begun.